work. Initially, we give advice to them and help them and support them. And from then on, after development leaders, they can do the job. And we can keep making monitoring the communities, but not so much engaged, but monitoring communities. And because this effort depends mostly on local leaders, so each community must have, no, for this to be successful, some leaders that can do the job.
Great, thank you very much. Friendly amendments? Reactions? All right, go ahead back there. You did jump up out of your chair.
I did, sorry. So can we add that this is basically trying to provide some sort of local capacity building?
Yeah.
So maybe developing a program that allows, some local capacity building in wherever we go.
I had kind of a question. If, along those lines, if this would be something separate from the previous proposal, because if we're going to be developing and training RISE network of responders or fellows of responders, wouldn't this be developing the RISE fellows within the community, having the same training or bringing their technicians? They are two separate things?
I would just add an end to that. I would say them as two separate. They funnel under the same part of training and educating,
Okay.
but one is for the fellows and the other is for the local community. So fellows will be engaged in that second point, but I see them as two separate.
So in order, just a follow-up comment, in order to make this work, we need to develop training at two scales. So that is another proposal. Okay.
It's two-tiered.
Okay, right, I'll be right with you a second.
So, friendly amendment, as I was saying, also add training on what is a research for communities, so they understand what we are doing and they understand that it can work better, and why that would add an understanding of their IRB for them. So that's like made them empowered in their own decisions whether they should be part of a research. So they can actually make informed consent. Like actually say
Right,
yes.
so we don't have the terms of agreement all done in this
Yeah,
tiny
like
little
small,
text.
eventually they get to understand what they're doing.
Okay, Faith, did you
In
want to?
that vein, could we, I guess frame it as ethics considerations for both whoever's coming down and also the individuals working with these things?
Faith, and then over here.
And on that, if there's going to be standardized workshops, and there should be standardized workbooks, literature, and if we're going to have standardized literature for trainers, community leaders, then perhaps that workbook should also contain public education.
Okay, last comment on this item, and then I think you're up. Did you?
I'm just trying to understand what we mean with leadership, because at least from my perspective, when I was working with the communities in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands and British Virgin Islands, there's a lot of leadership in communities. There's a lot of community residents that have leadership. The difference is that they don't have access to power or to decision-making processes, right? In order to improve the conditions in their community and to do the things that they need to do. But they have leadership, they have a lot of things, they have resources, and they have the capacity. So to rephrase, if we are developing a leadership program in institutional, like the university, or a leadership program in communities, right? So just to rephrase that.
No.
Quick response. Because
No,
we gotta move on.
I don't agree with that comment because my experience has been different. And perhaps you can find some leaders in some communities, but not all communities have this kind of leadership development necessary to respond accordingly.
So there are leaders, but they don't necessarily have the leadership.
Not prepared to respond to this kind of natural disaster.
Some
My
skills?
point is that
And also the issue of sustainability, we're assuming that we have leaders that can devote the whole day to this process. And in communities where you see this really happening is because the leader is financially supported. So how are we gonna ensure that this actor can devote themselves to really organize their community?
Right, so the mayor, but they're also running the, this business and that business. And
Yes.
that. Okay, all right, we're gonna go on. I think we have some good ideas there. We also have it on the tape, right?
Thank you. My name is Maggie Fagretti. I would like to see RISE start a K-12 RISE. I think it may cross-cut many of these ideas that are here and support them. I think teachers are the best way to help bridge into communities, to be the reciprocal sharers and creators of knowledge about and within communities. They will be the ones who are the main facilitators of student leadership learning, student science learning, student policy learning, and helping to create the transgenerational solidarity that I think is going to take in order to make a resilience mindset or resilient ways of thinking to help build resilient communities.
Amendment.
I would do two things, K-12 teacher training, and then I would also incorporate undergrads.
K-16.
As a friendly amendment, maybe it's a new
Sorry.
idea, I don't know.
I'll be right with you.
Combining
Anybody
the
who
other,
jumps up with a comment. gets
yeah,
the
combining the other two, which we've already talked about, right, was, these on-the-ground, the fellows and the communities. This is a way we could integrate the K-12. The fellow is driven by each area, so we have a RISE fellow in the Virgin Islands, a RISE fellow in the Carolinas, a RISE fellow in the Gulf. That RISE fellow then is in charge of working with the community and helping and bringing forth our written material and say, hey, this is how you operate it, this is how you implement it in your K-12.
So they're the translation to practice people.
Right.
I just have a question.
Can I have
Wait,
it?
okay.
Can I have it?
Wait, sorry, no, not your, here we go. Three.
I'd like to think of this as an amendment and not a new idea, but I think that you can integrate using your public libraries and that sort of resource, because I have a library background, that you can also have teachers and librarians can also promote that information to the public as well, so you don't have to just be in school or just a student.
Well,
in
you
order
can
to
extend
access
it to
that
community
information.
and to institutions,
Yes.
community centers, et cetera.
Formal and informal.
Formal and informal. All right, you're next. No, I'm sorry, I wish I knew your name, because you have.
My name is Olivia.
Olivia, you're up.
My name is Olivia. My name is Olivia.
Olivia's talking.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I had an amendment and I have a new idea. The amendment on the very beautiful RISE Fellows program, if, I think an amendment to the suggestion that you have them geographically, I think you have them by categories for building community. I think you have a RISE Fellow in preparedness. I think you have a RISE Fellow in resiliency. I think you have a RISE Fellow in community planning and capacity building. That's my amendment.
Okay, new idea, you have to get in line.
Oh, okay, sorry.
These gentlemen are in line. Okay, and do you want to respond?
I do. I just want to make sure that the sentiment is clear, that teachers are not deliverers of knowledge created elsewhere, that teachers would be fully part of RISE, that they would be participating in community-based problem solving with the support of the academic communities, as in Puerto Rico they are already doing. There are 3 public high schools that are focused on community-based problem solving. They are getting support from the local universities. We need to find good ways to support and expand.
Okay, we got 2 comments on this item back there. Are you standing to comment?
Yeah, to say something about public health in this.
Is that a new idea?
Well,
Yeah, you have to get in line if it's a new idea.
Amendment for K-12.
hold
Okay,
please,
sorry.
hold.
We got 2 here. All right, friendly amendments to this one, and then we'll move on.
Just a question before we continue. Is RISE open to membership and recruitment yet? If so, how do I become a member?
Okay, that's my new idea. Where's the line?
Yes, if you were at the end of Valerie's presentation today, she said if you want to be part part of the network, email her, so we'll make sure that question is made more clear tomorrow. Do
Okay,
you have
yeah.
another comment on this?
Yeah, my comment was on the ones you just took off. Especially if you're talking about undergraduate programs, maybe connecting into the already established service learning, experiential learning opportunities that are already ongoing to do some of this work. Maybe that's a great place to do that. I don't want you reinventing the wheel. So a lot of this is coming out of a lot of.
Integrate the
Hung up
service
on-
learning.
I apologize.
Experiential learning, service learning, applied learning, that's starting to happen on a large scale, especially at undergraduate levels, and in this field in particular. And we do it here at Albany, so I just want to make sure that we're not reinventing it.
Take your position, ma'am.
My amendment was just her comment.
Oh.
Don't reinvent the wheel. Come talk to New York Seagram, find out what we're doing, because we are doing this. So come to us, utilize what resources are already there. We'd be happy to tell you about what we're doing. We'd be happy to share our experiences and teach you how to do this, show you the programs we have. So just, yeah, utilize the resources that are here already.
Right, did you get, and it's Seagram?
Yes,
New York
Seagram, New York in New York.
For example,
New Jersey.
Seagram.
Yeah, that's,
For example, Seagram.
that's the idea. So that
Okay, no,
teachers would have access
okay,
to
go ahead.
all the resources.
New idea.
New idea. Okay, I want to tackle the ethics proposal.
We have- We have 17 minutes. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more ideas.
Yeah.
So let's,
So I'm tackling ethics. I'm talking about ethics. I think we could develop two things. One, ethics guidelines, suggested guideline, not a strict ethic behavior, but it should be adopted for researchers and specific research labs. And another one, suggested ideas that is brought to the community leaders for them to develop their own ethical guidelines. Already there are several indigenous groups that have their own ethic guidelines that regulate relationships with researchers. So we could be conduct to bring this information about rights to the communities, but also we should empower or ask researchers to develop their own ethical guidelines that go in parallel with the respect of the communities, and also these elements will help mediate a conflict and could also help address any problem that comes along the way during the context of disaster, so that we can help people develop their guidelines before disaster happens.
comment, your second, Yvonne? We got here number 1.
Yeah, it's quick.
Oh,
No, I think
number
just a
2.
comment.
Number one.
Okay.
We're all
I don't know the
trying to
name
do
of it, but there are a series of,
this. Talk to them.
there's already a series of ethical
Yeah.
and participation points that community, grassroots groups and indigenous groups have developed. I forget the name of it, but I've seen it used and referenced many times. So I suggest we don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I
and
totally
it is
agree with
written.
that.
What I need to say is that they exist, we know they exist, let's
Let's
make
start.
them open and adopt it as rights.
So back up to that asset inventory that came up
Yes.
in other
Yes.
areas. You're after you about that?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking like the same way that we have engineering standards, there should be RISE standards on how to deal with communities. So
Oh, very nice, very nice, yeah, okay. Your second, go ahead.
Right, standards of ethical training could be part of fellow training.
Yes.
Not necessarily.
Right, not exclusively, right? But certainly for fellows,
Yes.
plus, but maybe other members, right?
Could be open.
So I love the idea of having the RISE standards, and I feel like having something to work with from the get-go is great. But I would say that, friendly amendment, like the very first standard would be bringing those to the community and having them adjust or voice changes. You know, it's just like any research, how do we co-create ethical guidelines?
That came from over here, right? That idea that we orient them, yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, last comment on this?
Okay, real quick, if we're thinking about it as training, is it possible that this might be an opportunity for micro-credentialing from RISE on this one?
For what?
Micro-credentialing.
Badges? Everybody know what micro-credentialing is? You take a short course, you get like if you used to take a
Like it
computer
could be
networking
like
course.
a RISE
you get a
standard, so now you
certificate
really
that
want
says
that
you
person
took
in
this
your
8-week
community.
course, 3-week course, micro-credentialing and ethics
RISE
for,
standard.
yeah, cool. You're up, sir.
So, oops. We've been talking about and gathering great ideas. I'm sure the other groups are going to do the same. I have a very small, tiny, practical proposal for not for us so much as for the committee that's going to move things forward, which is RISE doesn't exist yet, other than in participating in these conferences. There's no budget. There's no. In principle, from what I've heard, academics, institutions, practitioners, or communities can approach the network when it's operational to seek participation or assistance, whatever, before, during, or after disasters, but especially including before. I think they need to work out what is, you get a letter, email, or call from a community in some state of condition saying, I've heard about RISE, I think we need help of some sort. Or an academic institution said, I don't know about RISE, we want to work with some community. In principle, we can work with any community, and we've said everything has to be tailored specific to the needs of the community. I think and I'm not part of that, but the steering committee or whatever needs to figure out a little bit of this,
Money.
how do you structure yourself a little bit, even before you have the first dollar, as to how you're going to approach things, because it makes a difference.
Yeah, governance. Right? Yeah, governance. Yeah, they need governance. Friendly amendment. That's lean and mean, that's a good one. Right? Right? People, when you answer the phone, gotta know what to say. Right there.
This idea, I'm not an academic, I'm a practitioner. My name's Sean Griffin. And I come from a policy background, so I think really we need to look at the legal infrastructure in 3 tiers. One, legally, how does this group, going back to governance, how do we engage? You know, what is our ability to operate legally from a regulatory perspective? The second is the legal infrastructure of disasters. You know, some folks brought up the Jones Act. You know, we did a good job of Hurricane Matthew. We did a poor job relative to the Jones Act and Hurricanes Irma and Maria. So I think we as a group should take a focus. I would even suggest that we have a repository or a knowledge center that's focused on disaster-related laws and regulations, and then also trying to map out the interdependencies of those laws against each other. And then the last thing is, on these communities that we engage, making a concerted effort that we first do a legal and regulatory canvassing of that community to understand how that community operates and how we can make systematic changes within that community in the immediate and in the long term. I'll use an anecdote. Right now we have these power safety shutoffs in California. There was very little due diligence from an academic perspective on what were the cascading and mutually reinforcing effects of those safety shutoffs to public health and communities. And I think this community RISE academics could really help shape regulation. That policy should be evidence-based, science-based, not just based on political whim.
Thank you very much. All right, you're in line. You're 2. Go ahead.
Oh, so maybe a little bit of a out the wall there idea, but in the legal framework, maybe is it possible for RISE to also have an advocacy component to policymakers around plans for disaster management and also funding in this space at the federal level?
Great, great. Okay.
Quick question on
Thank
that.
you very much.
Is that the same as lobbying or something different?
It's slightly different. It usually falls along the lines of associations, and they're able to advocate based on the research and things like that. Whereas lobbying, I feel like sort of special interest.
Okay, so we have 10 minutes left, so we're gonna go quick.
One quick comment. In Puerto Rico after Maria, there's a group that developed that. It's Pro Bono Democracia en Acción Ciudadana, so they have experience. They are not here, but we should, if we're going to tackle this and develop it, they have the experience on how to do it, so we might as well just include them. And she's my cousin, so we. It would be very easy to.
Right, so should we just don't reinvent the wheel across the top? Right? Okay, any other? No? Okay, go ahead. Introduce yourself.
It's very relevant, but I'm Kara Boston from Scripps Institution of Oceanography.
Oh, yeah.
And so it addresses
addresses one of the bullet points there about data sharing, and I was just gonna make a pitch for creating an inventory, or a directory actually, of data repositories. So instead of, creating a new database for information that might be useful to people who are interested in this kind of stuff and disaster data, instead endorsing specific data repositories that already exist, and then creating an inventory or directory of those to link to those different repositories. So, for example, Laura Keek today from UC Boulder talked about the Natural Hazard Center's repository for social science and engineering data related to disasters. So that would be an example. And has anyone looked at data.gov before?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're the same thing, they're a directory, so they point to other repositories. And that would be a way to not reinvent the wheel and also share data more effectively.
If I'm a RISE member, can I get an app on my phone?
That's 2022, we'll be there.
That's what, so I'm gonna use the facilitator's prerogative, and I have a friendly amendment. I really like this, but I think one of the other things that RISE could do is keep track of the kinds of data that people need that we can't find. So the gaps in the data that's available in these repositories. Okay, that's it. Then we have 1, 2, 3. Actually, I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, because you had a lot of turns.
I know.
And 1. Who was 1? I forget.
Maybe this repository could also include resources like granting agencies and so on.
Sure, like a resource. Right. Make it quick.
Yes, I think in additional to data, including either in the same repository, the software frameworks that allow the data transformation. Because in order to use the data, you have to be able to ingest it and extract and transform and load, ETL. Yes.
Okay, over here.
So just taking into account all of those, what I'm hearing, and I'm thinking that it might just work as a framework for everything here, would be if we called it, rather than a data repository, go one step up at the meta level and call it, do a landscape analysis that would have both assets, which are the first 2 bullets, as well as vulnerabilities, which I think someone else mentioned.
Right.
And that would be, I think, cohesive.
Coolio, you're up, but I'm not sure if did I lose somebody over here? Okay, go ahead, and then you're the expert on this.
Just to point out, along with the Hazard Center, the Disaster Research Center, and UAlbany just put in a grant to do a data repository for everything that you're just talking about, specifically looking at marginalized populations and providing data that is usable for those communities as well as for researchers and practitioners in that space.
Cool.
So
Don't
it's
worry about
partnering,
it.
it's
Perfect.
income.
So you're gonna do this.
And I'm
Yeah,
gonna-
that's what
I just
I
volunteered, so there's a panel earlier today, and Maureen Peak from Colorado Boulder, and she has existing repositories, so should I just put her name, contact, her name's
It's Convergence, it's a Convergence Colorado.
Yeah, it's convergence.colorado.edu, and there's another one from Texas, it's called
That was for the social sciences, but she did, there are repositories already out there, so I guess one of the suggestions is to investigate what already exists.
How about integrate, is our word was initially.
Absolutely.
Okay, Olivia, just 1 second.
No, I just wanted to highlight the
Okay.
issue that we're replicating stuff.
Right.
We're duplicating, it needs to be replicated.
Yeah.
Okay, did you get the
Gotcha.
right, is that the right URL, is that enough identifier information?
Yeah. I just wanna, can I make a
It's
clarification?
Converge.
I was saying a directory to other repositories that already exist.
No, that's
Right.
Directory, not a repository.
Okay, all right.
Okay, the website is called converge.colorado.edu,
Yeah.
we'll discuss that later. because
Okay,
it's not
all right,
so.
go ahead, Olivia.
Okay, so our idea speaks to operational systems and structure, particularly with this goal of being stakeholder inclusive. So part of our operational systems and how the organization operates and its structure have a way to identify stakeholders, recruit stakeholders, provide pathways for stakeholder involvement and inclusiveness, and provide some sort of metric to assess degree of representation based on where we are, the project, so forth and so on, so that we are sure that we have included all stakeholders.
That should be part of the RISE standards.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a very-
seeing here. Just 1 second. Did you get that? It should be part of the standards. Yeah, I'll wait. Any amendments on this while we're trying to capture it?
Well, we didn't get a chance to change the title of the previous one to directory instead of repository.
Okay. We have 4 minutes, so we're doing good.
Sorry, I'm not using Windows normally, so I have a little bit trouble here.
Yeah, here.
So what should I change?
Directory. Directory.
Directory.
Right. Perfect.
Oh, thank you.
Just a quick idea, in any disaster situation, there are a lot of public health issues. So part of the capacity building, the education for communities must be in public health concerning some example like water purification, basic hygiene measures, disease prevention, because in Puerto Rico we have several outbreaks after Maria, leptospirosis, diarrhea, conjunctivitis. So it's very important to people, because of the lack of water, to take some basic measures to prevent disease, and also in vector control and dead animals management.
Okay. So this is perfect. Okay. Any friendly amendments, additions, expansions?
Just look into the EPA. Like, look into the EPA, like they were saying that they have all these tools and capacity building. Just look into the EPA.
And we also have an expert here with us, Pablo. Isn't this your area of expertise to work with communities on public health, climate change, and environmental impacts? So we have a resource within us already.
Okay. So EPA as a potential resource and our colleague. Other amendments? Anybody have a new idea? We have
it here.
We have an idea. 40 seconds.
She has an idea. She has an idea.
And we won't even make you come to the mic. We'll ask you to stand up.
Yeah. She's a student and she's
I propose to make like an association in every university
Go ahead.
that has a Rice Fellow as their director, and like we can make like a president. It can be like an undergraduate student or a graduate student, and we can have a community like a group of students that are engaged to help the communities, like in the university area or other municipalities.
Would you mind having a RISE student?
A RISE students, exactly.
So we have RISE chapters on campuses?
Yes.
RISE student chapters?
Yes. Interdisciplinary, like with all the faculties involved.
Interdisciplinary with faculty involvement from across the discipline, from across the chapters?
That's a really.
And that's a group that could engage community leaders, talk about teachers. Come
Training to happen with students getting credit, certification.
Can you see an office somewhere in the youth center that says the RISE? Fellows? Okay.
Well, maybe I'll put this as an amendment to hers, but there's something called the Taiwan Declaration that was established in the 1990s, which is designed for universities. So maybe this could be part of this, which is that each chapter would at least advocate for its institution, but hopefully with leadership from the overall RISE also, that each RISE institution tries to join the Taiwan Declaration.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and is that it?
It's with an S at the end of it.
And
It's
there's
it's O-I-R-E-S. Yeah.
I?
Oh, okay, yes.
E-S.
E-S, E-S. Yeah, okay. It's a French, I can't pronounce it. Taiwan. Yeah.
Okay, so, I think we have 9, is that right? 9 action statements. Not bad for 40 minutes. Okay. So associations and universities, local leader capacity building, data directories, operational systems for engaging stakeholders, legal background, repositories, analysis, more of course, RISE governance, structures, ethics, training, engagement, standards, all of the things we said, K through 12 and all, K through 16, in all of its various aspects, and then leadership development, right? Leadership, not, you know, yeah, you all know what we meant, okay? So, comment,
I don't
because
know
we
if this-
have,
No time.
oh, we're 3 minutes over. Use your
I don't-
time wise.
I don't know if it relates to governance, to operationals, whatever, but if as we said before, the goal of RISE is not to replace other organizations, but to collaborate, whatever, that needs to be, how that's handled needs to be dealt with,
Yeah.
right?
In terms of standards.
Standards, or
That's an important standard. It's an important principle.
does it go in the directory, or whatever?
Okay. There's a hand here.
It's not a new idea, but it's a concern, and it might relate best with the advocacy idea, but my concern is that there's a lot of other big players that are not gonna consult us whether we want to or not, okay? And so in Puerto Rico, there's this thing called the Cohort 3, which is a small group appointed by the government trying to control blah, blah, blah. So the concern is how can we still break into that? Because that's not about us having a declaration or a plan, it's about us being excluded, okay? And so there is an aspect of political advocacy, I think, that relates to that. But I wanted to at least to think about maybe the rest of the day and next as we go forward, how do we break into this larger thing? Because I feel that we're all marginalized in that sense.
So getting a seat at the table.
Yeah, getting a seat,
Right? Getting a
exactly.
seat at the
Okay.
table,
But
right?
how to do that, I don't know.
So how to do that? So maybe is that its own action item?
Well,
Getting RISE a seat at the table?
I don't know, that's an
Or is it
actually,
getting-
it's an idea, but I don't have a plan of how to do it. I don't know what the resources are and all this stuff. But-
Okay, back there and right there.
So, no,
And
I
then
would
we're-
say that if we did what the young lady said, talking about making this as an organization, a lot of associations have an advocacy arm to it, and that's pretty common, and so maybe that's the framework to
Okay.
use.
Right, like the government relations.
Or you can do something related to government relations, you know, if they have those types of entities in order to, initiate, sustain, develop those relationships with aligned or not aligned organizations, so that, you know, there's some, sharing, there's some building relationships so that you can, you know, begin to have a seat at the table and, you know, create entree for collaboration.
Okay, last comment from the group, and then I'm gonna send us off to a very, very robust glasses of water.
Yeah, very robust. I have multiple robust.
Yeah.
No, I think this is such a tremendous group and such tremendous knowledge capacity. I would hate to see it fall over on its face because there's no focus. I think one of my concerns is that, and hope for the group,